All right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself and leading others. I'm John Laurito, your host. I've got a great guest today. We've been trying to set this up, and my issues on my end trying to get Audley and I connected. But I've got Audley Stephenson, who is the commissioner of the Professional Basketball Association in Canada, the NBL in Canada. He's a podcaster, a writer, a speaker, an influencer. All kinds of great stuff. Audley, thanks for joining today, man.
John, it's great to be here. Welcome to thanks for having me in your house. I know I had you on my podcast. We do a little swap here, which is great. I love the topic of leadership. It's something that sort of charges me a little bit. So I'm pleased to sit down and chat with you a bit more on this.
Well, I appreciate it because you've got so much to offer. You do so much in your world and in your life and your influence on a lot of people and organizations. So you're really the perfect person to talk to. I know my listeners are going to get a lot from our conversation and listening in. Let's start with the fact of you being commissioner of the NBL. That's a big deal. I mean, tell us about that. I know you've been doing it it's 10 years now. Tell us how that's gone.
Yeah, league's in 10 years in operation. We'll eventually talk about Audacious and what that means. But I think for me, a big part of that is sort of leading with your passion, right? So everything that you do starts with your passion. And I love basketball as a kid growing up. I never played at any super high level outside of being a local playground legend where I grew up. But that was the extent of my basketball career. But I still love the game, and that love for the game because of that love of the game, I was always finding ways to kind of be as close to it as possible. And it was even funny, when I think about the lesson in that, if we can find ways to stay as close to our dreams as we can, great things can happen. And so for me, it was like, hey, I love the game. How can I be a part of it? And I got into the podcasting game, if you will. And I started, I actually used to have an NBA podcast back in '07. I mean, now these days, everyone's got a podcast. They're like a business card, right? Mm-hmm. But back in 2007, that wasn't the case. And what made our podcast unique is that, basketball as a game, the Raptors weren't particularly great, so they didn't have a following. They hadn't won championships yet. So, that explosion hadn't taken place. And so we were considered a couple guys doing this podcast about basketball, and we were from Canada. And, people kind of, it worked to our advantage because that kind of resonated with people because they didn't understand how that was even possible, but we made it work. And so we had this great podcast. We had NBA guests. We had, all sorts of neat people come on the show. I remember Jaleel White from Family Matters. Steve Urkel was a guest. We talked NBA hoops. So it was a really just fun podcast. And in 2011, what coincides with the year that NBL Canada started, the NBA was in a lockout. Now, when you've got, and again, things are very different now than back then. Now, if there's a lockout, you're not worried about content. You still, because of social media, what players had for breakfast. What color their shoelaces are. You can still, still have lots of content at your disposal. Back then, that wasn't the case, and so I thought, well, what are we going to do to sort of fill that gap and fill that void? I'm like, hey, NBL Canada started. There's a basketball league in Canada that's happening. Why don't we switch over to this new realm? And we jumped over, and I essentially said, hey, I do this basketball thing in the NBA world. Why can't I do it for you? You're brand new. I knew they didn't have it because they were brand new. So I immediately saw where my opportunity was, and I found my gap. And I that was essentially my niche. And over time, I'm giving you the bridge, the Coles Note version, if you will. But over time, I found ways to become deeply and deeper involved with the organization. I became more reliable, trusted. I gained people's confidence, and I grew in the organization. And fast forward 10 years, I now sit at an organization that I approach as a volunteer of. And so that's been my journey. But I think what led on that journey, and I'll go back to the point I made, it was my passion. I said, let's try this. Let's do this because of the love of the game that I had. And the rest is history.
Well, I love it. First of all, I can tell you're super passionate about it. I mean, you're just, you're, for those of that are listening, I mean, you got this big booming smile and energy about you. So I love
Thank
that.
you.
And that comes, you can't fake that. That's authentic. And
Yep.
so it tells me you're in the sweet spot of life. I mean, you are doing exactly what
Absolutely.
you're meant to be doing.
Yep.
What I find really interesting is, it's funny because I think people think about, hey, here's my vision. I want to be the commissioner of,
Right.
a basketball, professional basketball league or football or something,
Yep.
whatever it might
Yep.
be. And they're
Whatever
thinking
it is.
about
Yeah.
what's the path to get there. With you, it sounds like it almost happened by just natural circumstance of saying, hey, I want to be surrounded. I
Absolutely.
want to dive into what I'm passionate about. Did
Yep.
you have 10 years ago an idea that you'd be the commissioner
No clue.
no?
John, absolutely no clue. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. So during that time, as I was getting deeper involved with the organization, and again, the idea hadn't been, well, this is where I want to be. That was the first thing from my mind. I just knew that I wanted to be around it, and I believed in what they were doing. I wanted to support the league in any way possible. So I threw in all my energy and all my passion and everything into it. I poured it into the league. And through that process, I started to work closer and closer with different individuals, some of the teams, and even the executives. And as time went on, I kind of sort of seeped my way into the boardroom. And I start to listen, I start to hear and learn and understand and gain this whole insight about the business operation of basketball. And that started to grow. And I'll never forget the moment when I'd gotten to a point where I had all this knowledge and all these insights, and I was contributing ideas, and everyone had a good relationship, and everyone loved me, and I loved them, and we had these big things in mind. The person who sat as the commissioner, it was the end of he was at the end of his agreement. His contract had run out, and he was looking to move on. And they were negotiating about, how can we get you to stay? And he was from the U.S. America originally. So, coming to Canada is away from his family. He was kind of thinking about those things. So he had this pull to kind of go back home, so to speak. But he, at the same time, wanted very much to be here. He and I were very good friends. I'd worked closely with him. And he went to he's negotiating with the board of directors. And he said to the board, you know what, this is a really big job. If I had a deputy commissioner that worked alongside with me, that would make a huge difference. And I really think, we can do some special things. So, they went off to sort of think about that, and my name came up, and they approached me and said, what do you think about this? And really interesting. I was at a sort of a turbulent point in my personal life. I was going through a divorce, and I was kind of at that point where I was kind of fighting this, this inevitability of the end of this relationship, and I was kind of fighting. And I remember, I'll never forget, it was a Friday that I was approached. So that Thursday, I kind of came to the conclusion, like, this thing I'm trying to fight, you just got to let it go. It's as much as I want to hold on to it, it's not there for me anymore. And I made that conscious decision on the Thursday to let go. On the Friday, I get this call saying, hey, do you want to be the deputy commissioner? And I vividly remember saying, well, let me think about it over the weekend, because I really didn't know and I hadn't thought about it. I couldn't see myself in that role. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is a tremendous opportunity. What is there to think about, right? But the big lesson in that was, the whole idea. Here I'm going through this personal turmoil, and it's like I couldn't receive the great things that was intended for me until I let go of what was holding me back. And that was a tremendous lesson. The other part about it too that I thought makes this story interesting is after I said, yes, I'll accept the role as commissioner or deputy commissioner, the commissioner the actual commissioner made the decision to go back home to be with his family. So he left, and essentially I was the commissioner as a result of just saying, so I said yes to a role and got something more than I ever imagined, and the ride has been great ever since. It's obviously lots of learning, lots of lessons, lots of bumps and bruises, no question about that. I wouldn't say it was an easy pathway, but it's been one that I've learned, and it's experience teaches you much.
Wow, man. Well, first of all, I so much there, and congratulations on everything, and congratulations on getting that opportunity. It's one thing to get it, but to really do something with it, and what you've done, obviously, that's tremendous. I love the concept, and I don't think many people realize this, that when you are holding on to stuff, whether it's anything that creates stress and just it occupies mental space.
Yep.
And most people don't realize that that does prevent you from having other things come into your life. It really does.
Right.
I mean, it prevents you from seeing things. It prevents you
Yep.
from taking actions that will open up doors for you. It prevents you from just creating the mental space to think about things a little bit differently. And I've been there personally myself with when I've made a decision that has closed out a chapter of my life. It has been remarkable at what that has done. And people, it's like, and I've seen this analogy in action where somebody holds out a glass of water, and it's a little, anybody can pick up a glass of water. But if you hold it out at arm's length for an hour, it becomes heavy.
That's right.
It feels like it's 25 pounds, and
that's
correct.
Correct.
It is. And if you hold it out there for 6 hours, it's, so the same small thing, when you hold on to it for an extended period of time, it just drains you, it weights on you, and prevents you from things like that. So I love that concept.
Yeah, well, it holds back and I oftentimes talk about the greatness that we're intended to receive, right? Mm-hmm. I truly believe that had I been devoting my energy and my mental capacity to trying to fix something that couldn't work, I couldn't receive what was waiting for me, right? I had to let go to get. And sure, it's really easy after the fact to come to this epiphany and realization. And in the moment, we've all been in these moments where it was so challenging and hard, but there needs to be a belief to know that we're intended for better. We're intended for great things. We just have to be able to receive it and be ready to receive it.
Love it. You talk a lot about audacious living.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that look like?
A concept. It's a way of life. You can insert the word bold. I'm not particularly a fan of talking about taking chances, because I truly believe that if you're being audacious, you're being true to yourself and who you're supposed to be. And if you're being true to yourself, you're never taking a chance. So I'm very careful when I talk about boldness and chance and risk that, you're not taking a chance when you're being who you're supposed to be in life. And I truly think that we're all meant to be this individual, an individual. We just have to go after it and get it and take that step forward. And oftentimes when we take that first initial step, you think back, you take a couple steps back, John, to before you take that step, you think of all the fears and the doubts and uncertainties and all that are in our heads about why we can't do it or why we shouldn't do it or why it's not the right thing for us. But when we take that chance and we take that step and we take that launch forward, that's the beginning of all kind of great things. And the expression, every great journey begins with that first step. But we've got to be bold and audacious enough to actually take that step to go on that journey.
So you got a lot of people that are listening right now saying, oh, man, I feel like he's talking to me. I mean, I know I need to do this. I need to take this next step. And whatever it is, maybe it's a job opportunity. Maybe it's starting a new career or a new path or a new relationship, whatever it is, or ending one. But it's one thing to know it and to think it and be like, yeah, he's right. I got to do this. But to actually do it and pull the trigger is really tough, right? And it's just that thought of it's the thought of all the things that could possibly go wrong.
Oh yeah, we've got them all in here. All the things that can go wrong, mess us up, send us. Oh yeah, we've got them all in our heads, but we've got to fight through that. We got to get past on the other side, because on the other side of that fear, doubt, and uncertainty, I believe, and what I preach is that's where the greatness lies, right? You can't achieve any level of greatness without coming through some difficult, rough patch of some sort. Yeah. But it's worth. I oftentimes use the analogy of a boulder in our path, right? There's a boulder in our pathway, and it's our job to get, whether it's up, over, around, through, whatever, but we got to get to the other side, because that's where the true greatness lies.
It's interesting. I believe in that 100%. When you're in a situation, before I left my nice, cushy, secure job, I thought I was at a certain level. I knew I could do more. Knew I could do better, but it was scary. It was really scary taking that leap.
Yes.
What I realized, though, is once I did that, there was a whole different version of myself that existed that I didn't even know. I had no idea. And it
Right.
wasn't until I let go of that security and threw that security blanket away and said, hey, I've got to do this. I got to take a chance. I
Yeah.
don't know what it's going to look like exactly. And it's
Yep.
okay, I think. I think that's a good message. And what I hear you saying, when you took that, leap and kind of closed the door on that, ended something you knew wasn't going to work, you don't necessarily know what things are going to look like, but you have
No.
to have some level of blind faith, and the best version of you will come out when you're
That's right.
sometimes in that uncomfortable
Yeah.
state of just, okay, I don't know what this is going to happen.
And you know what, John, oftentimes happens? We get a lot of markers and we get a lot of signals, and sometimes they come from other people because others can easily identify the greatness that lies within us, oftentimes before we do. So the same way that the board of directors, the chair came to me, he saw it before I did. Another quick story I'll share is during that time I was this volunteer of and I was a volunteer for several years. I had a dear friend of mine. His name was Rick, and Rick was a professional golfer, but he was also a big basketball enthusiast. Our daughters played the same rep team for several years, and so we kind of we sort of followed each other, and so he'd become a friend of mine over a series of several years. He unfortunately took ill with cancer. He had pancreatic cancer. He was battling it, and his days certainly were numbered, and we'd come to terms with that quite some time ago. But he very much was very energetic and passionate about life. And I remember once NBL Canada was holding a draft, and I saw Rick would love this. I'll bring him out to the draft, and he absolutely soaked it up. He got to meet the players. He got to he was always giving advice, or he was talking to people, and he was in his element. And I remember we were driving back home, and he was all jacked, he was all excited, and he said to me, Audley, I can see you one day running this league. And again, this was the furthest, wasn't even there, had no idea, no clue. And I just said, yeah, sure. And I said, sure, no problem, Rick. And it started to then become a regular conversation between he and I. He would talk about, hey, why don't you think about this? Why don't you approach this? Have you thought about that? And it was continuous. And I remember even as his illness progressed, he would still call me like once a week and talk about different ideas. And at this point, I'm entertaining him, but I also, I'm more focused on his health. But, he was really passionate about this. Unfortunately, he passed away before he could actually see the realization of what he saw come to life. And I remember sort of having a moment going, man, I really wish Rick was able to see this. And I sort of stopped myself, and I realized he already did see it. He saw it a long time ago. He saw it before me. He didn't need to be here to see it. He saw it before. And so again, we get these indicators from other people that can see our full perspective. Sometimes the view of our own selves is limited, but the outside viewpoint is fantastic. And so even when we're in that moment where we're feeling, when people start to encourage you and people are saying, yeah, you should, pay attention, because they can see something that we can't always.
That's first of all, that's a really touching story, and that's and you're so right. People sometimes see those things that we just can't.
Yeah.
I got also great advice one time, a long time ago, from somebody who said, you know what, we sometimes get, and this person was speaking to me, he said, you're so focused, maniacally so, on what you're trying to do. That's okay, but it's also bad because you put the blinders on and you truly don't see it. He said you've got to actually pay attention to the signs out there. There's things that are going to be put in front of you that if you're so myopically focused and maniacally focused on one thing, you're going to miss them. And if the current, you're in a boat and the current's taking you a certain different direction, sometimes you got to pay attention to that and say, all right, let me just see what's over here.
That's right.
But I love that. And that's something I think as leaders we can do for other people too. We don't realize, I'm sure Rick, I'm sure he does and knows what's happened, because you're right, he saw it and he's there in spirit.
Absolutely.
And he sees it. But there are also there's people, things that we see in others, and sometimes we don't say something. Had Rick never said something to you,
that's right.
Maybe you wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
That's
you
right.
don't know.
Yep.
But it takes that little push, and that's somebody saying, hey, you know what, you'd be great at this.
Right. Right. No, you're right. And I think and as you say that is a reminder to me how important it is that if we have an opportunity to, pass on a word of encouragement, give a kindness, support in some way, we should take advantage of it, because we've no idea, in that moment what it means to that individual, and whether you're in a leadership role or not. Quite frankly, I think that's a sign of leadership, that of being able to do that, to build up others, to support them, to lift them up. I think that's a tremendous leadership trait, an important one, because the others, we talk about the others that are around us, help, so they support the leadership framework. Right. If you don't have the others, who are you leading? I mean, you can lead yourself, but you have others that you need to be a part of this journey with you. So absolutely, if you can take advantage to do that, by all means, I think you're on the right path.
Yeah. What are some of the other ways that leaders can learn to become better leaders? One is, being in a role obviously is going to develop you and everything, but
sure.
What do you suggest, or what do you do to become better at what you're doing and better at influencing people and impacting organizations?
Number one is listening. I think listening is key. Hearing what people are saying, not necessarily even just about you, about the organization, how they feel about it, how they perceive it. This year NBL Canada is celebrating its 10th year of operation, and which is a big deal in Canada, because there hasn't been a league in Canada that's been around as long as we have, and so it's a really big deal. And so when I'm with our staff and we're talking about it, like I'm listening to them talk about how special it is, how important it is, and how good of a job that we've all got to do to elevate this year. Well, that's an important. Hearing that is important for me, because then I need to understand and know, not that I didn't, but that what is important to us collectively, what all we need to be doing. And so, listening has tremendous advantages and benefits in just being able to check the pulse, have a gauge, check yourself even. I know sometimes feedback isn't always easy to hear about ourselves, but I think we need to be open with, hey, how am I doing? Check in with people, right? And be prepared to accept what comes your way. It may not all be rosy, and it might be really honest, and it might cut you a little bit, but I think those are important things that we need to hear to get better. So, for me, when I talk about learning, listening, absolutely, paying attention to sort of those before us, people ahead of us have forged trails and pathways for us for a reason. Now, I think it's important that we pay attention to whether their successes. I like to really pay attention to why people didn't succeed and why they missed the mark. I noticed I didn't say the word failure. Right? Mm-hmm. Why they missed the mark? Why didn't they get where they wanted to? Like, what prevented them? And I think if you can walk away from those situations with the lesson, you didn't fail. You just didn't have enough time to get where you needed to get to. I don't know if you remember the movie Coach Carter, the basketball coach. I heard him actually very recently. I heard him say that he's the only coach in the world that's never lost. I've never lost a game. I've just ran out of time. I've never lost, right? And that's exactly it. Like you keep going, and it's not failure. It's okay. I missed my mark. Let me keep on going. So, so listening, absolutely, paying attention to past lessons are the two big ones I would hone in on.
I love it, and you're so right. And it's a never-ending journey. You're always going to get better and better, and there's things that you're going to see, and I really love that. You're going to hear and observe and listen and take things that you wouldn't have gotten before, insights that you wouldn't have had, ideas that you wouldn't have had, perspectives that you wouldn't have had. And as the old, very not used enough saying goes, you got two ears and one mouth, use them in proportion, which I also learned at an early age. So.
That's a good one. But also say too, an important aspect, of especially when we talk about the listening and the feedback thing, is the environment that leaders create. Right? It's got to be conducive and allow for that safety. That if I say to my manager, my boss, my supervisor, in a respectful fashion, obviously, like you want to maintain that, but be able to give feedback, knowing that it's safe, knowing that there's no reprimand, knowing that it won't be held over my head. I think that's also a really, really key aspect of what leaders can do. So you've got to so it's not just enough to say give me your feedback. I've got to create that environment where it's safe to give the feedback.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I remember, and this goes back a number of years, but I remember a leader who was very much vocal about, hey, I want feedback. I really value your input. And
Yep.
there was one situation where he referenced in a third-party way somebody who would given him feedback, and he was kind of very negative about that person. Hey, they don't really know what they're talking about, whatever. It was a small comment, but I remember talking to him afterwards. I'm like, you don't realize that comment there, even though it wasn't directly directed to that person, they just assumed that, okay, why would I give him feedback if this is the way he responds to it? So it's a little stuff that we might say one thing, but it's little stuff we do that might, close down that feedback loop. So
you're right. You're right.
Great stuff, Audley. This is absolutely phenomenal. I could talk to you for hours. You're a
Same
wealth
here.
of information. I know there's a lot of people out there that might want to learn more about you. You've got your podcast, obviously. There's other ways people can connect with you. If they want more of Audley, what do they do?
Thank you. First off, John, it's great to be here. Thank you for laying the foundation and making it easy to have these discussions and share these ideas. Again, I just gave the example of how important it is for leaders to create an environment, and that's exactly what you've done through your platform. So congratulations to you as a fellow podcaster. I know what the journey can be like, and whether it's technical or guest booking or whatever, I get it. So congratulations. My podcast, it's the Audacious Living Podcast. I'm very close to reaching 100 episodes, which is a big deal, and to get that kind of milestone, which is nice. But yeah, again, we talk about all sorts of great principles, invite wonderful guests. My website is audaciouslife.com. That's where you can sort of connect with me. My socials and all those sorts of things are there as well. I'm active on Instagram these days. A lot of basketball stuff, as again, I've got to support my brand at NBL Canada, so that's a big part of what I'm doing. But these conversations and dialogues and discussions are very, very important to me. In some ways, I sort of feel like I lead two separate lives here: the sports world and sort of this, the self-development space. But it's a place I'm very comfortable in both. I invite conversation. I encourage connection. I think it's great. I think that's how we learn, grow, and develop together. And quite frankly, I don't know how else you can make this a more audacious place. So by all means, connect with me. I'd be happy to chat.
I love it. Well, you've been a fantastic guest. Greatly appreciate you joining. And for all of you out there, we'll have all that info in the show notes, so you can go check out Audley's podcast, his website. All the information will be there right in the show notes. And we've been here today with Audley Stephenson, who is the commissioner of the NBL Canada, podcaster, writer, speaker, influencer. Great guest. I'm very interested in your ideas for future guests, as well as content of this show. As always, like, share, subscribe, and go down below, give 5-star review. And thanks for joining, everybody. And Audley, thanks again.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.